again, honoured to have another titan of the gaming industry in the Design Notes studio. And this is Matthew Dunstan, designer of Relic Runners, designer of Elysium, and many, many other games. Matthew, welcome. Welcome to Design Notes.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, Ben, and for that extraordinary epithet to give me of a titan of the industry. I think I'm barely a minnow, a dwarf, but I'll take what I take.
Well, you've started off with customary modesty, and this first question is here to divest you of that. So
there's no comfort to me to start. It's just straight into the hot seat here.
Absolutely. So my first question is, when did you know that you were good at what you do?
I should have prepared for these questions. I think when I was able to get my second or third game signed, I think when you make your first game, or your first games, there's many games you make before that are never released to the world, and they're all terrible, and you certainly don't feel like you know what you're doing then. And my first game that got signed was a bit unusual. I was in a competition. It's sort of a once in a career kind of happenstance, and I don't expect it will happen again, that someone will show my game on my behalf and a big publisher will pick it up. So I think even at that point, you're like, oh, okay, maybe that was a bit of a fluke. I think when you go after that point and you return to the drawing board and you start making games again, and you realize, oh, I can do this, and I can not reproduce it, but I can be consistent, and what I'm making publishers want to sign. So I think it's probably in that, second to fifth game signing sort of period. I don't think it ever happened. It was never a moment where you go, yes, I know what I'm doing, and I'm good at what I'm doing.
And so Relic Runners was fascinating because it was just before it seemed that there was a tsunami of games every year. And so Days of Wonder, they had their annual release, and it was always a sort of crossing the calendar moment when Days of Wonder announced sort of what they were going to release for that year, and Relic Runners was the game for that year, and it caused a big stink at the time. I mean, how did it feel to be signed by, one of the most well-regarded publishers in the world for your first game?
It was quite incredible. In a way, I wonder if the experience was slightly wasted on me, in that I think the first game for any designer, I think, is a big moment. No matter who that publisher is, I don't think you worry about the renown or how many copies are being printed, or it's the moment of holding the physical copy of a game in your hands that, some number of years ago was just paper and pen or an idea. And it's interesting because I had that amazing feeling. And even I look back and they were showing the game off at Spiel, and there was they have a huge stand and art on the walls. And I did a signing session with Julien Delval, who's the fantastic artist who's done Ticket to Ride and many other Days of Wonder titles. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And I had all these experiences, and I think at the time I certainly enjoyed them, but it's funny, only looking back, I realize how special that was, and how fortunate, and how, what Days of Wonder brought to the table. Because again, it's only by comparison do you realize how special that was. And working with other publishers who maybe don't have the same resources to devote to the development process or the promotion process or production made you realize, like, wow, actually this was very, very special, a lot of passion and financial resources put into the game as well. That's not replicated in every project I've been in. So I've actually appreciated more over time, like a fine wine, I guess.
And so what was your awareness? Because I remember when Relic Runners came out, and I was listening to an awful lot of board game podcasts at the time, and the sort of commentariat around board games were all talking about Relic Runners, and they were all talking about this new guy who designed this game. And how aware were you of that? I mean, what was your sort of consumption of board game media at that time? Were you aware that everyone was talking about it?
I think I was a little bit aware. I mean, I would look for reviews, and if somebody put something on the Board Game Geek page, I think that was my main way of probably figuring out whether I wasn't that big on. I don't know if I was very big on Twitter at the time. I don't think I was necessarily. I wasn't very plugged in with social media. I still am not completely plugged in with social media. So I was aware to some extent of it, but not. I didn't have the full range of like the board game media discourse to kind of work out where I was sitting in that. But of course, the things that I read, and there are a few really nice interviews that I did also around the time that were just a really nice moment to be able to connect with these people in the board game world and who seem to like this game, because that is also a very new feeling to have someone you've never met play your game and like it, and you had nothing to do with it. You didn't influence the process. You didn't. So that was also something. I guess that was my main takeaway. It was mostly positive. I didn't have any sense of there wasn't any talk about avalanche of games or was this the right. I think later on, you started to work out that maybe the game was a little bit unusual in that I think it took some people by surprise, and on reflection, it didn't quite fit in the Days of Wonder kind of like exact family slot. But at the time, it was just very positive and welcoming for me. I was like,
and was it weird? Is it weird that people contact you and say, hey, would you like to come and give your opinion on things and be a part of this media product from sort of 1 second to the next?
Maybe I was really introduced to it in a really nice way. I remember actually really well, really my first interview in a way was with Michael Fox, at the time was still doing the Little Metal Dog show. And we did a in-person release of Relic Runners at a board game cafe in Oxford. And he travelled down as well. I think it was my first time I met Michael in person. And we just had an on-camera sort of interview. I think he either transcribed it for audio for the podcast later or something like that. And it was just really friendly and really lovely. And Michael's a wonderful person. I hope he would count me as a friend. I count him as a friend. And I guess that introduction made me, in some sort of naivete, just sort of go, well, this is how it's done. Everyone seems to be good folk. I'll just go along with it. But I know that's not the case for everybody, so I was certainly fortunate.
And so a lot of your sort of notable work has been done in conjunction with Brett Gilbert. How did you two get together, and sort of why has the relationship been so fruitful, do you think?
Well, it's a lesson for everyone out there. Always stalk your idols on the internet. It's worked for me a couple of times so far. And Brett had a blog, a great blog. I'm not sure, many people won't have read it because unfortunately it's not really, I don't think you can even find it anymore. He used to write really great articles. And this, of course, was in the time, this is sort of 2010, 2011. And again, as you were saying, this was sort of before, I think, the advent of a lot of board game writing, especially about design. And it was fantastic. I read it when I was back in Australia, and I knew I was moving to the UK. And I think on a whim, I just messaged him, maybe through Board Game Geek, or I found some contact on the website and said, I'm coming to the UK. I love your writing. Be great to meet up. Or maybe it was going to Spiel or something. Turned out he lived in Cambridge. I was moving to Cambridge. And I think we met for the first time actually at Spiel that year. But then we quickly met in Cambridge and started meeting weekly. And so, again, it was just this very easy thing. And Brett's a very affable sort of. I think then he was probably even less jaded. I wouldn't say he's jaded, but he's become more certain in his preferences in terms of both consuming and designing board games. But at the time, I think he was very open to a lot of things, and he had just signed his first game, so we was roughly at the same position in a way, and we just got along. I guess it's sort of interesting. I was reflecting the other day about it. Is that I think we've managed a very, I guess, professional relationship. I think we get along very well, but at the same time, there's been a good balance about things not becoming, we haven't become too close or too much in each other's pockets, which I think I've definitely seen examples in my own life and in friends' lives where when you have that combination of a very, very close personal relationship and a professional relationship, that's often a recipe for disaster. It can be fantastic while it works, but more often than not, something comes up eventually that kills it. But with Brett, we've just kind of got the perfect balance, actually. And I think by chance, we just have skills that complement each other incredibly well. And I haven't really found that with it. I like collaborating with lots of different designers, but I haven't found that fit. I think part of it is that people talk about the sort of 10,000 hours of designing or 10,000 hours for any skill. And we kind of put in 10,000 hours of learning to collaborate,
right?
Which made that process a lot easier. But at the same time, that skill fit. He's a great editor. He has a great sort of developmental mind. He'll look at games and take them apart or think about how they will tweak them. He has very different preferences, so he'll bring something new to the table. Excellent at rule writing. But he's not maybe as good as coming up with new ideas or making a first prototype or kind of fleshing out a design if you need 50 cards that all do different things. That's not the kind of thing he likes to do or is very good at, whereas I'm very good at that. So that meant that we could be both get along well and be quite effective and prolific, I guess.
And I was interviewing David Thompson for this show, and he credited essentially, meeting Trevor Benjamin, his design partner, and also his entry into the world of design. He credited it to the Cambridge Designers Club that you and Brett ran or still run, and what was that club, and why do you think it was so effective at churning out people who went on to get games signed?
It's a good question. It just started Brett and I. It wasn't a club. We just met in a pub once a week. It was just the two of us. We were very soon joined by Andrew Sheeran and Tom Morgan-Jones of Terrible Games. So they did the game War on Terror. And it was just the four of us, probably for about 2 years, I think. And Brett and I were really designing more regularly, and Andrew would sometimes bring on it. You should interview Andrew sometime, by the way. He's he makes these amazing satirical games that often the most fun of a new design of his was discussing it rather than actually playing it. But anyway, it from that kind of very informal, again, meet up a pub once a week sort of thing. At some point, we always knew about Playtest UK, this network of design meetups in the UK run by Rob Harris. And they had their first meetup was in London, and it had been going for some time and sort of running in parallel or at the same time as what we were doing. And I think at some point, Playtest UK decided to kind of expand a little bit or a bit more formally. So our Cambridge meetup was put on, the Cambridge group or meeting was put on to meetup.com, the site that Playtest UK was on. And it meant that we started getting more people who would just find us on the internet and come along to the group. And so, there was a period where we would have really actually quite a large number of people coming and a good maybe 8 to 10 regular people every week. And it's interesting because when you talk to other designers and other, playtesting groups, once a week is actually quite frequent, actually. And the fact that we could have that number of people. And Cambridge is a really good town for it because there is such an influx of people from all around the world. People like David Thompson, who's from America. Trevor's from Canada originally. It came via the Netherlands and then to Cambridge. So it attracts people from all around the world from, and it is a university town to a certain extent. So you've got a lot of people with different, diverse sort of set of skill sets, but also maybe a higher concentration of people who might be interested in designing games, possibly, or are of a background, a privileged background, definitely, that, can play games and afford, new designer games. So it meant you've got that concentration, and you've also got a lot of change and influx, a lot of people coming, a lot of people going, people to come to Cambridge for a couple of years and maybe leave again, or that, so it meant the group was always getting fresh blood. So that's really important for, I think, having, a lot of vibrancy in sort of games being made. And I think the other thing was that we were always very open about sharing ideas, about working together. And again, maybe that was because it started with Brett and I, who were working together. We weren't, and we always found, if you played something and the other person had a good idea, why not try and co-design? That was always just a very natural tendency. So I'm sure that kind of ethos spread to the group. And so you had a lot of people co-designing with each other. And mixing that up, we made some map once of, because I've made a game with Trevor, Brett's done games with Trevor, then obviously David and Trevor, and there's all these different sort of matchings throughout the group. And the final thing I think is that, for better or worse, maybe we had a good idea about how to approach design in a professional way, how to get games finished, how you might approach publishers, and that sort of thing. we were lucky that Brett had signed a game to Asmodee, so a really good publisher who knew what they were doing. I'd had the experience with Days of Wonder, and so maybe those really early experiences also helped us, mentor or help newcomers in how they might sort of navigate that process, which meant that you could kind of convert a lot of designers, not just from beginning designers, but actually to published designers. Not that that should be the only function of a group, but it was particularly fruitful. So I think again, a lot of things come together at the right time and the right place to make a really wonderful group, and we all got along well, which is also helps.
and so you design alone and you design with other people. What is your process of game design? How do you get from an idea in your head to the finished game, and how different is it when you're working alone to working in a partnership?
It always has to start with some, it comes from the ether sort of thing. I can't exactly always pinpoint where an idea will come from. Although more and more recently, I'm reaching out to spheres outside of board games. I devour a lot of video game design videos, even though I don't play many video games myself, or sports. I'm really interested in different sports theories and things. And so I try to be very wide, be open to media of lots of different types, and often ideas will sort of come through that. Either very specifically, I'll like, oh, that video game, I should take something from that, and it should be a board game, or somewhat subconsciously, where I'm like, oh, that experience seems really cool, wouldn't it be great to have that in a board game? And once I have that idea, then that's the question of like, I decide, do I want to work on this myself, or do I want to work with someone else on it? Because a lot of my collaborations will be me bringing an idea into that collaboration and saying, do you want to work on this game together? Not always. Sometimes someone else will have an idea, or we'll kind of meet and say, we want to make a game. We don't know what it is. Let's co-brainstorm and come up with something. But the most common thing is I have the idea, and then if it's co-designer, then I bring it to them. Often I will still make the first prototype, and that's the same if I was solo designing. So the process is, in the early parts, quite similar, and it's like squeezing blood from a stone. I'm not sure what other designers have said on your show, but in that first prototype, I hate it. I hate doing it mostly. I am not a particularly gifted, graphic designer or technologist who knows how to use all the, I get it done basically. And I always know the first one's going to be terrible. Maybe I don't put enough effort into the first prototype, and so the result I expect is what happens, but I sort of set myself up to fail. But at the same time, I know that, and I know the process now, so I can get past that and get into the subsequent iterations and things like that. But it's still not fun. That's still not the fun only happens when it starts, either when something happens in the game which you didn't necessarily expect from the idea, and you're like, oh, actually, this has some value outside of like the prescribed value I kind of see from the idea, or it's really living up to what I thought it could be. Or when a game really just starts humming, even if it was kind of expected, you're like, oh, I thought that if I put these elements together, that could be fun. But it's the first playtest where you just don't go, oh, I have to make 80% of changes. Okay, there's these cards I need to tweak, but it's generally fine.
So you've been a designer now for a number of years. How has your process changed, or has it? Have you become more efficient in getting that painful first prototype out and all of that sort of stuff?
I think I have become a bit more efficient. I think you skip a few more steps at the start. I think you can throw away certain parts of the design before you make the first prototype, because you have just a better sense of whether something will work or whether it's interesting. I think I also probably abandon ideas more quickly, even, again, before the first prototype's made, or maybe even after the first or second prototype. I have a better gut instinct of, is it worth going through the process of iterating or not? Am I going to end up with something worthwhile? And it's even the question of finishing a game or not. I think it is very good advice for starting designers to always try and finish games. That's really one of the hardest things, is to finish a prototype. But I think when you get to a certain point, you don't want to fall prey to the fallacy of lost work, or that's not the name of it. I've forgotten the name of it. But don't be afraid to throw something away if it's not going to ever get to an important point. And maybe that's also, the industry has changed at the same time. It's not just my own skills as a designer. I think the industry, and if you want to be a professional designer and making games that will be signed, if that's what you're trying to do, you don't have to be as a designer, but if that is your thing, which is what I'm trying to do, then you are a little bit at the whims of what publishers want and what the market is kind of doing. And with the great number of games being published, it just means the standard of your own standards have to become higher, because it's fine to finish a game, but if it's just okay, and I'm even at the point, if it's just okay and a publisher think it's fine and they want to publish it, I have that thing in the back of my head. I'm like, does this game really have to be made? Is it really going to,
right.
Is it doing something? It could do something for me and I could be happy with it. But if it's not really something that I'm really super passionate about, if I can't really see why would players be interested in it, you question what you're doing. And so you want to have those questions, obviously, before you finish the game. And that just helps you be a bit more selective on what you work on. I think the other thing also is you just do get a few more opportunities to work in different ways. I'm working on a digital game with another app designer who I stalked on the internet. I've worked on some young theatre group game projects. You get these different opportunities which sort of challenge the way you work, but they keep it interesting because you have different constraints, different processes. So I think that's the other thing that changes with time.
And when you're working with Brett, what is the criticism process like? Are you brutal to each other, or is it all very nice and polite?
Have you met Brett? I mean,
I have briefly, yeah.
Oh, I see. No, it was a bit of a joke because there's a bit of a saying around the Cambridge group is whether your game has been Brettified or something. Basically, has it been played by Brett yet? Because I said a bit earlier, he has become a lot more selective in his tastes and also less willing to sort of put up with rubbish in games. He'll just say it as it is. Basically, he's more blunt.
Right.
And I think we're very much like that with each other. I think and that's normal and it's needed. And I think we know each other so well that I'll know when Brett will be a bit annoyed with something, or he'll not be very interested in something, and I'll be prepared for that, and I'll say, look, I know this isn't really working right now, but I can see where this is going, or I can see the audience for this type of game, even if it isn't exactly you. And I think it's just honest. I guess that's the basis of it, and it works quite well. And again, because you know each other, you sort of check your own ideas before they even get to the point of collaboration to a certain point of view. And I think I need that. That is still the most important part of a collaboration, is to be questioning of the other person's design, because not only does that get rid of the bad bits, but it also can help you discover the good parts of the design, or to ask that question, like, why does it work like that? What if it worked like this instead? And you just may never have even thought of that, and that's incredibly valuable. Those are sometimes where you get the best games coming out of that collaborative process. So yeah, just open honesty and questioning at any point, and being open for the game, and just knowing that the game is this kind of shared creation. I know it's interesting sometimes talking to other designers who only do solo work, is they don't have this sense of being able to share that creative work, but for whatever reason I'm just used to it, and it doesn't even enter my mind. I have a very kind of loose ownership of something, and I think you need that. You need to feel connected to it, and you feel like you're doing something it belongs to you, but it also belongs to someone else, so you can't hold on too tightly.
And you're currently designing a series of games, the adventure game series. And you've just entered the world of being a full-time game designer. How? And I know being an actor, that getting a contract that potentially has some sort of duration is a real boon. How is it having, knowing that you've got 18 months of a series of games to design and you've got a contract to do it? How does that make you feel in terms of your own security?
I think there's two main aspects to it. One is the financial side, which, as you said, is, I imagine maybe it is similar to acting, that knowing that there's, you just have more certainty is the fundamental part. So much about game design is uncertainty. It's uncertain whether you'll work on a game, whether it will be signed. If it is signed, will it be released? If it is released, will it be received well? If it's received well, will it be republished or will it be? So it's all these stages, and actually, the designer in that whole process often has the least information. Publishers will know a lot more about what's going on with the game they're working on. They might not. Some of them don't communicate very well with you as to what's actually happening or when it might be released, and you don't control whether it's delayed or all these different things. So when you have a good working relationship with a publisher, doing a series does two things. Obviously, there are more games coming out, so that's great. There's a certain mark for that. You know that you're going to get those advances. That's fantastic. You get to shortcut some of the design process because it's a game that's established, so you don't have to go through that early thing of trying to come up with new things. You're designing in a different way. You already know what your constraints are. You know that game, and you're trying to iterate on it. And the last thing is you have a better chance for success because the players know what to expect as well. So it helps them, there's a greater confidence that they'll buy the next thing. So all those things, all that kind of certainty also leads obviously to financial benefit in that, or not necessarily financial benefit, but just more assured financial benefit. So that works out really well. But the flip side of that is that it does, more than anything, I think, make it feel like a job more than it ever did before. Because you do have that, you can kind of start charting out. You're like, oh, so we're doing 2 a year or whatever. It's like, oh, yep, in 3 years, I'll still be doing this. And you very rarely have that feeling as a game designer. You very rarely can look 2 years in the future and go I know what I'm going to be working on. So in some ways, we haven't got there yet. And again, I'm collaborating, it's a co-design with Phil Walker-Harding on the Adventure games, and the team at Cosmos is really great. So I think as it stays collaborative, it helps us stay fresh. But I'm sure there will reach a point where I'm just I just don't really have anything else to add anymore, or this really is just work to me. And that maybe that's not a bad thing, and maybe that's actually a good transition to make, because then you start treating it like a profession and treating it like a job, and you need to be serious about that. And to be sustainable, you do need those gigs. But I guess I'm right in the transition, so I'm probably chafing a little bit at the, I thought I was going to be able to be free and design whatever I want, but it's actually just another job sort of thing. But all that being said, it's still incredibly fortunate, again, akin to the acting thing, because it is the thing that's let me be a full-time game designer more than anything, is that certainty.
And so, on that then, what do you have coming in the future? What can we expect from you in the next year to 18 months?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time, I think, because there have been a lot of projects that have been delayed, obviously, through the pandemic, and also delayed for other reasons. With Rory Muldoon and myself, we've actually just launched a bit of a weird new venture called Postmark Games, which is going to be focusing on print-at-home games that will be distributed via Kickstarter. So the idea of printed play as well as this common term. So we're going to be kickstarting. So I've said in a lot of other interviews, and probably this one, that I never ever wanted to be a publisher. This is probably the closest I will ever want to be a publisher. We're doing it the easiest way possible. It's only digital distribution. It's very low price. Rory's a fantastic graphic designer. He's doing all the graphic design of the game. And it's an experiment. We'll see how it goes. So that's the first Kickstarter will be very soon, probably in a few weeks. So that's something a bit completely different. There will be... AEG have started talking about, there's a game called The Company of Merchant Adventurers, which is co-designed with Brett. That will come out, I think, around April or May next year. There are already a few pitches on BGG. It's a flippin' feel, or it's a flippin' write game, but you're not doing any writing. It's a maybe the best thing, a close kind of connection would be something like a Flip and Fill cross with Kingdom Builder or something. So you're sort of exploring your own map and using, but all playing at the same time. There'll be new adventure games where I'm sure they're up to the 6th one was released in German at Spiel. There'll be more coming out in English as they translate them. There's the Echo series with Ravensburger, so they will release the 3rd one in English soon, the Microchip, and the 4th one will come out early next year, and the 5th one is already done, I think. So that's another series that we're working on. There will be Monumental will finally deliver. The expansion for Monumental African Empires will deliver next year, so people will finally get to play that, including myself, which I'm playing it with the real components. I think that's it for things that have been announced. Vivid is coming up very soon. It was kickstarted earlier this year. I'm sure it's coming to backers very soon from Floodgate Games. I'll have to come on if I forget things. I should have had some some list up of things that there's definitely things happening. There's a game with Plan B that hopefully will come out next year as well with Brett. That will be hopefully in the middle of the year. And we have signed one last narrative game with Dave Neal. So Dave is my collaborator on Echoes. He's a fantastic narrative game designer, fantastic writer. Generally, he did the latest box of the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective mystery, the Baker Street Irregulars. He's fantastic. I also met through Cambridge. And we have a new game that will come out with Space Cowboys next year, which is going to be a little bit like a follow-up to Unlock. It's not exactly, but it's another kind of narrative-based cooperative game, which should be really exciting. So plenty of stuff, but it's always like until you can, especially right now, until you can hold the box in your hands, you don't quite believe it. So fingers crossed it'll all go well.
Excellent. So 2 more questions then. Firstly, you're at a convention. It's in the evening, you're out for dinner and you go to the loo and you come back and you hear your name mentioned by a group of gamers around a table. So you sidle into the corner and you eavesdrop. What do you hope they're saying about you?
Oh, wow. I don't know how... Well, I just hope that they enjoyed a game of mine that I made, I guess. Or that they even... It's a very egotistical thing to say, but I don't design games that are very similar to each other. So I think that mostly people are quite surprised when they realize they connect the dots that game A, game B, and game C are all by the same person, or at least had the involvement of the same designer. So it'd be great if somebody realized I'd made, not that I've made lots of games, but to have made some connection, I guess. And there are some little similarities sometimes, but it's a very different thing. Like, I'm not like a Stefan Feld or a Vital Lacerda or even a Martin Wallace. I mean, gosh, I'd love those people just from a game design pedigree, but more from the sense of a brand or it's very easy to connect. Like, if I like a Vital Lacerda game, I'm probably going to like the other ones, and so the designer and the creation get connected much more closely. Whereas I think there are some amazing talent designers, not just myself. I think Vlada Schvartel is also a bit like this, even though he is a giant anyway. But if you look at his ludography, it's just anything and everything, basically. I actually really admire designers like that who are able to do that and put out such quality games, but in such different spaces. I think it's quite incredible. Theo Rivert from France, who I collaborate with, he's also doing a lot of really interesting kid games, interesting cooperative gamer games, card games, everything. So that's so I guess I hope they realize that this person may have designed a couple of things that are the same person.
So, final question then. Why is gaming good?
Because it just brings us together. It is this... It provides this opportunity for us to connect with each other. I think it doesn't matter so much about what the game it is itself. It's the kind of social experience it fosters. And I think it's different to a lot of other ways we consume. I mean, it's not media, but I guess media and entertainment. Majority of those things are quite solo experiences, and increasingly also virtual experiences. And board gaming at its heart being a physical in-person experience, which combines that social aspect with something that you can be a bit guided. Like, I'm not the most gregarious person either. I find it hard to meet new people sometimes, and games are just this wonderful way. They give you a guide rails to how that experience can go, and you can sort of dip your toes into the sort of social aspects while you're playing the game. And it's a fantastic way to get to know people or for the first time or subsequently. So I think the way of fostering human connection in a quite gentle, organic way at its very best. I know board gaming is not always like that, but at its very best, that's why gaming is good. And I think we need that. I'm very glad that I do have that. And slightly related to that, I think gaming is good because it's a fantastic way to spend time with people you really care about as well. It's this kind of like a warm blanket you can come home to in the evening, and you know it's there, and it's just a nice way to spend time with each other, which again is not solo or looking at a screen. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but it's a different. You develop different skills or different appreciation for your partners or your siblings or your children, and that's a really powerful thing.
Brilliant. Well, Matthew Dunstan, thank you ever so much for giving over your time for me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Ben.